All right. Hello, everybody. Dan Sam. Real excited to be here with Kelsey Moody. Kelsey's got a really impressive background as an entrepreneur that actually started, I think, when he was in medical school and raised money. But Kelsey's got an impressive career in drug development and other areas, and hoping he could share a little bit about his journey, how he got to where he is right now, which is managing sort of a portfolio of companies and actually also helping with building the entrepreneurial ecosystem in upstate New York. So welcome, Kelsey, and you share with us a little bit about your journey. So.
Sure. Well, thank you for having me, Dan. Really appreciate it. The thing about being an entrepreneur, I think, is you just roll up your sleeves and dive in, and sometimes you're ready for it and sometimes you're not, and you just kind of see how things go. And that's kind of what I did. I had started off my backgrounds in undergrad in biochemistry, and I went out to Silicon Valley for a few years to work at a therapeutics startup that was backed by Peter Thiel and the Founders Fund. And, in that time, that was kind of the heyday of Silicon Valley, where I learned a lot about, what you could actually do on a shoestring budget and bootstrap your way, not just in, something like, software where you can sit at a cafe with your computer, but also in biotech and pharma. You have all of these different companies that are coming and going, and, lab equipment holds its value like milk once it's been purchased. So what we found out there was that, there was a huge plethora of opportunity and equipment on the used market. And with relatively little funding, we were actually able to set up a pretty impressive, suite of technical capabilities in our little startup. Unfortunately, we ran out of funding, so I landed myself in Syracuse, New York, as a medical student at Upstate Medical University, and was really interested in doing research as well as medical education. Unfortunately, didn't make it into the MD PhD program, so I was just a medical student, and independent of faculty support, I applied for and won a $540,000 private research grant to start my company, Ichor Therapeutics, which I actually started in my living room apartment in West Syracuse. That was something that was very common in Silicon Valley at the time, but absolutely unheard of in conservative central New York. But with that modest amount of funding, I was able to set up full R&D capabilities. I had cell culture hoods for maintaining cells. I had a flow cytometer, fluorescence microscopy. The work that I was doing was involving human hematopoietic blood stem cells. So these are the cells that are in your bone marrow that give rise to your blood system. And the way that you study these is you inject them into immunocompromised mice, so mice that don't have an immune system. So as part of this kind of living room lab, we also set up a full vivarium, so an animal facility that was clean rooms, gown in. We used HEPA filtered air purifiers to keep a positive pressure gradient and clean air inside of the rooms. My girlfriend, who started the company with me, was completing her veterinary doctorate at Cornell University at the time. So all of the quality control, pathogen testing, et cetera, that was done at the level of Cornell's very impressive facilities were being done at the level of our living room lab from day one. So, and that's something we're able to do with, literally pennies on the dollar. So that was kind of how we got the start.
Yeah, I was here at sort of the startup entrepreneur working out of their garage. You never figure it's a drug development entrepreneur. So you're able to do all of this in your living room. That kind of blows my mind. I mean, how does that work? I mean, is that regulatory wise, compliance wise? It helped, I guess, to have a significant other who's a veterinarian.
Yeah, so on the regulatory side, that's a good question. It really comes down to zoning ordinances. Depending on the location that you're at, if you're in the middle of the city, a lot of times they can be really strict about having a residence and a business at the same location. The place that we're in, our first commercial building was actually an old beat up hair salon in a nearby town called Lafayette. And the reason that we moved to Lafayette is they didn't have any of the codes that would prevent us from, living and working in the same location, because it's a smaller town. Biotech isn't something that existed there. So we petitioned the zoning board explaining that the sort of waste we're generating is similar to a doctor's office, and at least at that stage of the company's history. And their ordinances permitted a doctor's office from also having apartments in the same building. So we were able to, get our first commercial space and have apartments for all of our founding staff. On the animal side, mice and rats are actually pretty minimally regulated federally and in New York State unless you receive public funding, and we were privately funded. So we needed to notify the state that, we were having mice. But that's basically all the regulatory requirements that existed. On our own election, we did decide to set up an institutional animal use and care committee. So this is the IACUC that oversees all the animal protocols. We did have an intending vet that was boarded that worked with us as well. But interestingly, that's stuff that we did just to, try to maintain best practices. That wasn't something that was actually required as far as I'm aware.
Okay. So you're bootstrapping this out of your house. How did you take it to the next level?
Well, I was, in medical school while I was doing this, and by the time I finished my second year of medical school, it was really interesting. I had just lots of inquiries coming in, online from people that were kind of following us and asking me if, oh, well, could you do this study for me? Could you do this study for me? And I'm like, I'm in my living room. Like, this is a living room laboratory. This isn't a commercial facility that's designed to support client work or contract work. And one of the groups that reached out to me was a high net worth individual that said, well, I think what you're doing is pretty awesome. I'd like to do some projects with you. What would it take for you to be able to run a proper commercial project? And so we kind of chatted through that, and he funded our first commercial build out and was kind of an anchor client for a couple years before he came on as a major investor for the company. So, that was a really great opportunity to build that relationship, and all of our major investors into Ichor Therapeutics proper, the main company, have been people that have been, clients of ours for years prior to, actually being allowed on the mothership, so to speak.
What was the business model back then? What was the technology?
So we had a few different things that we were working on. So my internal interest was in hematopoietic stem cell research. So being able to take blood forming cells, rejuvenate them through a variety of small molecular gene therapy means, and use those for different hematopoietic indications. On the client side, I had a lot of interest from, my background and focus areas are all in gerontology, so the study of aging. Got a lot of opinions about drug discovery for aging, which is a whole different conversation. But you can imagine, we had a fair number of different high net worth individuals, nutraceutical companies, and so forth, that were really interested in, looking to see whether, compounds and formulations they're working on actually had therapeutic benefits. And, the handling of geriatric lab animals, especially mice, as you think about an older person, they don't respond to anesthesia as well. They're very sensitive. They respond to stress very poorly, and the same is true with with aged mice. So it's kind of its own discipline to be proficient in handling these animals and working with them, and that was something that we built out very early on as a core competency.
Okay, so take us further down that journey to where Ichor is right now. So
Yeah, I guess the story of Ichor is my successive building projects from one building to the other. I'm currently sitting in our fourth facility, and we just completed a phase one of a large expansion in northern New York, up in Potsdam, with Clarkson University, which is a prestigious engineering school. So we have two facilities, one in Syracuse, New York still, and then one up in Potsdam. But yeah, as I really had started off as more of a clinical guy and a cell biologist, and being interested in aging and drug discovery in general, what I came to learn was how difficult, how most of the development problems are really at the stage of the biophysics and the structural biology and recombinant protein manufacturing and that kind of stuff, all of the smaller than cell disciplines, so to speak. And so as we became more and more sophisticated, we made a really huge push to bring in that expertise. There was a small boutique protein engineering company called Finger Lakes Bio that had incorporated also in Syracuse a few years after I had started. I met the principals there and helped them get their initial funding, was really interested in the technology they're developing. It was a solubility tag that basically helped us make difficult or impossible to express proteins on scale for drug screening applications. And they had come to me with this business model, and they're like, "Oh wow, we could make protein and sell it to big pharma for screens." I'm like, "Well, if you can make proteins that no one else in the world can make, why would we sell them? Why wouldn't we do the full drug screens ourselves in-house and own all of it and then sell drugs instead of selling proteins?"
Right.
And
because the former is kind of like a commodity.
yeah, exactly. That was exactly right. And so I remember calling up one of my investors he was a tech investor. I was like, "These guys are going to talk to you. You're going to have no idea what they're talking about. They need $100 grand. You should just wire them the money. I promise this is going to be worth your while." And he talked to him. He got back on the phone. And he's like, "Yep, Kelsey, I have no idea what they're talking about, but I'll go ahead and wire the $100 grand." And he did that the following week. They ended up raising about 300,000 around the tech before Ichor functionally acquired them. And then we proceeded to raise about $16 million around the technology for various applications, including high throughput drug discovery. So that really gave us a big boost financially, but also put on core competencies in protein expression, biophysics, and structural biology to kind of aid the rest of the pipeline with cell-based screening and in vivo pharmacology that I had been building.
So that financing, which sounds like, I don't know if that was one of your first really large financings, but it was around a business focus on high throughput drug discovery. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, so for that particular one, we had done so we had found a couple very high impact targets that were very interesting to different biotechs in the aging space. And these targets, no one was able to make them, so no one was able to really do a good job of trying to drug them. And we were able to manufacture several of those targets on scale. So we were able to secure large amounts of venture capital and partnership opportunities through joint ventures and that kind of stuff to develop different programs.
Right. You were telling me earlier that you got some significant funding while you were in medical school, and that kind of changed your life path. I deal with a lot of medical students who dream of being entrepreneurs. And I think what you did is probably their dream, but could you talk a little bit about how that happened and what happened?
Yeah, I mean, I was so I had a decent network of investors and philanthropic organizations that I was associated with from my time in Silicon Valley, and I reached out to one of those groups, the Life Extension Foundation, about some research that I wanted to do when I was in medical school, and basically gave them the plan, and they knew it's something I'm very passionate about. I had a good reputation based on my time in Silicon Valley, and they knew who I was and the kind of work that I did. So they agreed to go ahead and fund me to do that, and that really jump started the entire thing. It's the important thing is, from day one, even when I applied to medical school, it was kind of funny. I was in one of my interviews and they're like, "Well, why do you want to be a physician?" And I was like, "Well, I don't. I want to build pharmaceutical companies." And they're like, "Well, why are you in medical school if you don't want to be a physician?" And I was like, "Well, I feel like I've got a good handle on, cell biology and a lot of the research stuff. My MBA with Concordia, a lot of the business things I was pretty comfortable with. So the plug there for sure." But I said, "I don't know anything about clinical medicine. And it seems like if I want to invent drugs, I probably should know something about that." And that really was certainly helpful in giving you the background. But the point is, my goal was never to get an MD or a PhD or an MBA or anything else. The goal was to build a pharmaceutical company that could go after diseases that no one else in the world knows how to approach. And anything that I did was a vehicle towards getting to that goal. So when I did my MBA, that was a vehicle to help me get to that goal. When I went to medical school, that was the vehicle to get to the goal. But when I had enough funding that it made sense to pursue the company full time and withdraw from medical school, the MD was never the goal, it was always the vehicle. And that kind of narrow focus on the prize at the end really allowed me to think creatively about, I describe it as water, right? You're going to get to the bottom of the hill no matter what. And it doesn't really matter what the path is. You're going to find it if you're focused on getting to the bottom of the hill, not how you're getting to the bottom of the hill.
Right. Yeah, I like that philosophy. I mean, everybody else kind of latches on to Bill Gates and Steve Jobs not finishing their college education, but we would all be so honored to have either of them teaching at a university where we kind of are too hung up on credentials. So since I'm the dean of business, I don't repeat that. I said the degree is not the important thing. It's like you said, it's the vehicle to get somewhere. I would imagine that your single-minded focus on that is probably what got you respected and connected to investors. I mean, if I'm thinking about kind of keys to your success, maybe you can help me tease that out. But it was that single-minded focus and passion and commitment. I mean, the scrappiness to be doing this in your living room, but you started out with connections in Silicon Valley. And, I spent 10 years in California, and it's just such a vibrant world. Everybody's connected. And I think, I don't know, we're a little, I don't want to say isolated in Milwaukee or upstate New York, but can you talk a little bit about how important those connections were and how you made those connections and leverage them? I mean, we can see kind of how you leverage them. So.
Yeah, I mean, the connections are everything, but the connections don't need to be all the time. And geography doesn't play into it that much, in my opinion. With the web and different social groups and things like that, it's very easy to find like-minded people. It's very easy to plug in with these different communities and different communities that have different research interests, whether it's a cancer advocacy group or whatever. Sometimes there's high net worth individuals there, and those people are interested in funding interesting things. And a lot of times, especially in the life sciences, what I see is, most, not all, but many, I'll say, nonprofit foundations, don't spend that much of the money that they receive on research. A lot of it is on advocacy or, just fundraise, spending money on marketing effectively for fundraising to sustain the foundation, which is important. Advocacy for causes is a thing, but when you get to dealing with high net worth individuals, a lot of the ones that I've interacted with, they're like, man, if I could just, rather than donate hundreds of $1,000s to this or that, I'd love to give $250,000 to, a med student who is either going to succeed or fail. And if they fail, they're going to fail super fast and super hard, but they're going to at least go balls to the wall, try this thing out and give me, a definitive, yes, this is going to work, or no, it's not going to work, right. kind of an endpoint. And they're going to put their money where their mouth is. And then we find out if they're right or not. And that's what I like to think with the, investors that I've worked with. I'm very blunt. The ones that come in super early, I tell them this is philanthropic investing. There's a possibility, there's a very high failure rate. There's a high probability that this doesn't go anywhere, but, we're going to give it the best shot that we can. We're going to be communicative through the entire process about exactly where we perceive the risks, what we think we can do and what we can't do if different outcomes, come out, and really outlining that roadmap for them. So they're informed about the risks, but then, when we start knocking down technical issues or whatever, they can also be very excited and know that. And I think if you have that level of transparency and honesty with the investors, and they become more partners than just some third-party group that's giving you money, that's a much better relationship, both for the investor and for the entrepreneur.
Yeah. Well, it sounds like you were saying a lot of your money came from high net worth individuals, angels, who are probably sometimes passionate about a disease or aging in that case, which the FDA is telling us is not a disease, or foundation. So, I talked to VCs, and, one person was saying, I don't really care about your technology. All I care about is what's going to be my return in 5 years. So could you talk a little bit about your approach to fundraising for different audiences? So you're talking about foundations and angels. There is probably a mix of looking for some return on investment, but they're also for the angels, but they're probably passionate about something. How do you strike that balance versus straight ROI? So
I don't, because there's nothing that I go after. Like, everything that I'm going after is $1 billion product, or it's going to fail, period.
okay.
And in the life sciences, and Dan, you've worked in the life sciences, it's very unpredictable. The timelines for development are typically very, very long. So you need to partner with investment groups that are going to give you the runway you need. They're going to give you the flexibility. They understand that it's an iterative process and that nothing ever goes according to plan, and that sometimes science is science and science is very difficult. So when it comes to working with different investment groups, we've turned down money plenty of times because you get investors that are only focused on ROI. I'm of the mindset that if I make a product, a drug that works, the market's going to take care of itself, particularly since I'm targeting age-related chronic conditions that don't have effective therapies. Anything that I work on is going to be $1 billion product. So I'm not focused at all on what the ROI is, because if it's successful, it's going to be huge. I'm only focused on what are the technical hurdles for getting there, what is the quality of the technology. And I think, very frankly, the high rates of failure that you see in the life science industry for drug development specifically is because the people that are writing checks are not paying attention to they're not paying attention to the technology, or they're not capable of evaluating it. I have a little talk that I give to my team. I say that there's 3 steps basically to moving a drug forward in terms of fundraising. You have your idea stage. That's a place that you can raise money. I have this idea I want to try. You have a smart box. The smart box is your machine learning, your AI, your biophysics, your structural biology, your biochemistry, that very technical set of whatever that gets you to your drug. And then you have pivotal animal studies, which you can also fundraise at. Most of the people that I've encountered that make funding decisions are clinicians or business people. They don't evaluate what's in the smart box. You have to have a smart box, but they don't evaluate what's in the smart box. They just say, okay, the smart box exists and animal study worked, so ergo this must be a good product that is investable. Or you get the people that are happy on the idea side because you don't have any preliminary data. And where I think we're different is our team lives in the smart box, and we're not interested in making decisions based on animal studies per se in isolation, or based on ideas or theory. We're interested in living in that smart box and understanding why the things are working or why they're not working, and having complete control over the systems. And the types of investors that are attracted to us are investors that fundamentally are technologists that understand that if you make a product that you fully understand and it works, that de-risks everything downstream, because I'm iterating for hundreds of thousands or low millions. The second you go into the clinic, you're iterating with tens of millions. So get your iterations out of the way in the smart box and then the preclinical animal studies, and that's a better place to be doing that kind of back and forth. And the number of we've worked with a lot of different groups. And we do a lot of client work too. Probably I'm probably servicing over 50 pharmaceutical and biotech clients right now, and the amount of people that aren't paying attention to the smart box and are funding things or making decisions just based on one animal study that kind of worked-ish, it's really eye-opening for me, and very helpful in guiding how we're approaching our programs and where the risks in development actually are.
So is your business model kind of split? Because we're talking a lot about drug development, but you talked about servicing 50 companies. How are you servicing them in some sort of CR contract research organization model?
Yeah, so basically we used investment capital to put on all the equipment that we needed to be a soup to nuts drug discovery through preclinical in vivo pharmacology shop. So we do, again, protein expression, structural biology, biophysics, cell-based screening, and mouse and rat stuff. We have all this equipment, but we're only using a small portion of the capacity at any point in time. And, even from the living room, I was getting inquiries about doing contract work for third parties. So I was like, well, that's a great source of income. It gives us an opportunity strategically to be able to see lots of different programs. So, I feel like we have a pretty good handle on what the major technical hurdles are that are facing most pharmaceutical programs, because we're the ones that end up solving some of those hurdles. Different types of protein expression, and how do you study intrinsically disordered proteins when all of your normal tools in technical tools aren't viable for studying drug protein interactions in that respect. So we do about, I'd say 40% of our revenues come from internal programs that we're developing, and then about 60% is from client work that we're servicing. And that provides a nice balance of, again, we see a lot of different things, we get a lot of experience solving a diverse set of different technical problems, and it also diversifies the funding sources for us to make sure the business stays viable.
Gotcha. So that kind of magical technical box is what the pharmas and CRO people that want you as a CRO are paying for. You must have convinced them there's real value there. For the 40% of internal revenue, what is that coming from? Do you have products you're selling yet, or is it mostly services?
It's all VC funding. So the business model, Ichor is the main company and also the service provider.
Right.
And then for every single internal program, when it reaches a certain level of maturity, we spin it out as a dedicated, as its own Delaware C Corp IP holding company.
Nice.
And if you think about, we have an eye disease program. A lot of investors don't care about ophthalmology. Some are very focused ophthalmology program investors. So by having the different programs and kind of satellite companies, it gives a lot of flexibility with deal structuring, a lot of flexibility, bring in the right investors at the right time. And then those entities can, contract Ichor to actually do the work, or other CROs for stuff that we don't do. But it's all shared management and largely shared ownership structure.
Nice. Okay. So it's kind of like a platform technology and expertise and all of that. And then when you have a drug development project that's promising in a certain area, you might spin that off as a separate company.
Exactly right. And that allows that entity to, grow on its own. A lot of people have asked me for any particular company, how long do I want to run it for? And the answer is as long as it makes sense to. So while we're at the stage that we can provide the most value, that makes sense. But, at some point, I'm not a guy that's bringing stuff through the clinic, and I'm probably not a guy that's going to bring stuff through the clinic. I'm a guy that's going to bring stuff to the clinic. So, being able to set the business model up so there's a nice handoff, so you can, because the discovery expertise is completely different than your regulatory expertise is completely different than once the product gets into the clinic.
Right.
And then post-clinic sales, I mean, they're all different knowledge bases. So we want to focus on what we do well and bring in the right people at the right time for the other parts.
Yeah, I love that model. Very flexible. So, well, I think I really appreciate you taking time to share your journey and some lessons learned. Any sort of final words of wisdom, or we got a lot from you in this short time. So
I think just looking ahead and understanding what the end goal is the big lesson that I've taken from this. Everything else kind of falls in place if you know what the end goal is. And the number of people that get hung up with, oh, I'm doing a PhD to eventually do something else, I don't know what, or an MD for whatever. It's easy to just kind of get caught up in the process and not on the destination. I think the destination is where people should focus.
Yeah, good lesson for students, but also for life in general, I think. Thanks, Kelsey.
Awesome. Thank you, Dan.